The first time Adrian Blackwood offered me money, I refused it because I knew some gifts came with invisible handcuffs. It was 2:17 in the morning, and the rain had turned the windows of Miller's diner into long silver mirrors. I could see my own reflection moving between the booth's pale face, tired eyes, brown hair slipping from its ponytail, the same blue uniform I had washed so many times the fabric had gone soft at the elbows. The coffee smelled burnt. The neon sign outside kept flickering like it was too exhausted to stay alive. I had been on my feet for 11 hours, and my left shoe had a split in the sole that let cold water kiss my sock every time I crossed the mat by the door. Table 7 wanted more cream. Table 4 wanted his burger remade because the onions had touched the bun. The man in booth 9, a veteran named Mr. Ellis, was counting quarters with hands that shook. I pretended not to notice. Pride was a fragile thing. You did not stare at it while it was breaking. Take your time, I told him, sliding the check face down beside his coffee. His eyes lifted to mine, embarrassed and wet. Claire, I'm short tonight. I smiled like it cost me nothing. Then tonight is on the house. It was not on the house. Miller would have taken it out of my paycheck if he knew. So I took $6.40 from my apron pocket, the tips I had been saving for gas, and tucked it under the register drawer when no one was looking. Almost no one. In the back corner booth, beneath the broken light that always hummed, a man in a black suit watched me over the rim of his coffee cup. He had been there for 40 minutes and had barely touched anything. Not the coffee. Not the pie. Not the water. Men like him usually wanted to be noticed. This one made being unnoticed feel like a threat. His hair was black, brushed back with careless precision, and his face had the kind of calm that made loud people seem cheap. 2 men waited outside under the diner awning, both in dark coats, both standing too still to be customers. A black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted deep enough to swallow the streetlights. I knew money when it entered a room. Real money did not sparkle. It lowered the temperature. I looked away first, because waitresses learn that staring at powerful men is a good way to get unwanted trouble. Then a man at the counter laughed too loudly and pushed a folded $100 bill off the edge of his plate. It floated down soft and green, landing near my shoe. There's your tip, sweetheart, he said, grinning at his friends. Pick it up. The diner went quiet in that ugly way public places do when everyone wants to witness cruelty but no one wants to interrupt it. My fingers tightened around the coffee pot. I looked at the bill on the floor, then at his polished watch, then at his face. I set the pot down. Slowly, I pulled a clean towel from my apron and laid it over the money like I was covering something spilled and unpleasant. Keep it, I said. You need it more than I do. His smile disappeared. Somewhere behind me a spoon stopped stirring, and in the corner booth, the man in the black suit finally put down his cup. I felt it before I saw it. His attention. Heavy. Precise. Like a door closing softly in a very expensive house. I turned just enough to catch his eyes. Gray. Cold. Awake. He did not smile. He did not approve. He simply looked at me as if I had become a question he could not walk away from. I should have been afraid of that look. Maybe part of me was. But I had spent too many years watching my mother apologize to men who use kindness like a leash. I had promised myself I would rather go hungry than kneel for comfort. So I picked up my tray, straightened my shoulders, and went back to work as if nothing had happened, even though everything in the diner had shifted. The rich man at the counter stopped laughing. Mr. Ellis stared into his coffee. Miller watched from the kitchen window with panic in his eyes. And Adrian Blackwood, though I did not know his name yet, watched me like he had just found the one thing in Chicago his money could not buy. By closing time, the rain had softened into mist, but the air still felt charged, like the city was holding its breath outside. The glass. I wiped down the counter with slow circles, trying to pretend I did not feel the man in the corner booth still watching me. He had not spoken since the $100 bill hit the floor. He had not laughed, shifted, or checked his phone. He simply sat there while the rest of the diner tried to remember how to breathe normally. Miller came out of the kitchen with his towel over one shoulder, and fear tucked into every wrinkle of his face. Claire, he whispered, grabbing my elbow just hard enough to make me stop wiping. Do you have any idea who that is? I looked toward the corner without meaning to. The man's gray eyes lifted, as if he had heard his name even though no one had said it. A customer, I said. Miller swallowed. That is not a customer. That is Adrian Blackwood. The name landed in the diner like a glass set too hard on a table. I had heard it before, of course. Everyone in Chicago had. It moved through neighborhoods in half sentences and lowered voices. Blackwood owned restaurants, shipping companies, private security firms, buildings with marble lobbies and elevators that required key cards. People said other things too, but people said a lot when they were afraid. I kept wiping the counter. Then he can pay for his coffee like everyone else. Miller stared at me as if I had just stepped into traffic with my eyes closed. You do not understand. Men like that do not come here by accident. Maybe he likes bad coffee. Claire. His voice cracked. Please do not be clever tonight. That should have scared me more than it did. Maybe I was too tired for fear to work properly. Maybe pride had a strange way of keeping you warm when everything else in your life was cold. At 3 o'clock, Miller locked the front door and turned off the neon sign. The diner dimmed until the whole room became reflections and shadows. Adrian Blackwood stood. Every sound seemed to step aside for him. The soft scrape of his chair. The faint click of his cuff link. The rain tapping the windows. He placed cash on the table for a coffee he had barely touched and a slice of pie he had not eaten. Then he walked toward the door with the kind of calm that made space open around him. I kept my eyes on the sugar canisters. Do not look. Do not invite anything. Do not become interesting to dangerous men. But he stopped beside me anyway. Close enough that I caught the clean scent of rain on wool and something darker beneath it, like cedar and smoke from a room I would never be allowed inside. Claire Bennett, he said. My hands stilled. I hated that he knew my name. My name tag was small, scratched, nearly unreadable. That is what it says on the uniform. Most people would have picked up the money. His voice was low, smooth, not angry. That was worse somehow. Most people were not asked to crawl for it. His eyes held mine, and for a second I saw something move behind them. Not amusement. Not offense. Recognition, maybe. Like I had touched a bruise hidden under an expensive shirt. You are either brave, he said, or very tired. I folded the towel once. Those are usually the same thing for women working night shifts. Behind him, one of his men opened the door. Cold mist slipped inside and curled around the floor. Adrian reached into his coat and took out a black envelope, thick paper, heavy enough to feel important before it touched the counter. He placed it beside my hand. For the trouble tonight. I looked at it, then at him. I did not have trouble until you walked over here. Miller made a small sound from the kitchen doorway, half prayer, half panic. Adrian did not look away from me. Open it when I leave. No, the word came out before fear could edit it. His expression did not change, but the room did. It tightened. No. Take it with you. He studied me as if I had spoken in a language he had forgotten but once knew well. You do not know what is inside. I know who it came from. For the first time, silence reached him. Not the room. Him. His fingers rested on the envelope, then withdrew. Good night, Claire. He turned and walked into the mist, his men following like shadows pulled by gravity. I should have left the envelope there. I should have let Miller handle it. I should have gone home, taken off my wet shoes, and forgotten the way Adrian Blackwood looked at me when I said no. Instead, I grabbed the envelope, ran through the door, and stepped into the rain after him. I caught him before he reached the black SUV, though caught was the wrong word for a man like Adrian Blackwood. He stopped because he chose to stop. One of his men moved first, stepping slightly between us without touching me. His expression calm in the way locked doors are calm. Adrian lifted 2 fingers and the man stepped back. No words. No effort. Just command traveling through the air like electricity. Rain misted over my face and settled on my lashes. My diner shoes slipped against the wet pavement, and the black envelope bent slightly in my fist. You forgot this, I said, holding it out. Adrian looked at the envelope, then at me. The streetlight above him flickered once, turning his gray eyes almost silver. I did not forget it. Then you misplaced it on purpose. Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth and disappeared before it could become human. That is an interesting accusation. It is an accurate one. The SUV idled behind him, engine low and expensive, warm air breathing from the vents into the cold Chicago night. Across the street, a traffic light blinked red over an empty intersection. The city felt too large and too quiet, like every window was listening. Adrian took the envelope from my hand but did not put it away. Do you always return gifts unopened? Only the ones that feel like tests. His gaze sharpened. And what did you think I was testing? I crossed my arms to hide the way my fingers trembled. Whether I had a price. For the first time his face changed. Not much. Just enough. A faint stillness around his eyes, a pause in his breathing. I knew then that I had stepped closer to the truth than either of us expected. He turned the envelope over once, slowly, as if it had become heavier in his hand. Everyone has a price, Claire. No, I said. Everyone has a pressure point. That is different. The words came out before I could soften them. My mother's voice lived inside that sentence. I could still see her at our kitchen table years ago, pale under the yellow light, counting bills with one hand and wiping tears with the other. I could still hear the man who said he was helping us. I could still remember how help became favors, and favors became control, and control learned to call itself love. Adrian watched me so closely I wondered if he could see the memory moving through my face. You speak like someone who learned that the hard way. I speak like someone who has to open the diner in 5 hours. I pushed the envelope against his chest. It touched the front of his coat and stayed there between us. He did not move. Neither did I. Take it, I said. I cannot. You can. His voice lowered. You simply do not want to. That made me angry because it was close enough to true to hurt. Of course I wanted to. My rent was 6 days late. My car had been making a clicking sound every time I turned left. My mother's hospital called twice that week about a balance I could not pay. $10,000 would not fix my life, but it would let me breathe for a moment, and breathing had become a luxury I could not afford. I looked down at the envelope and hated it for tempting me. Then I looked back at him and hated him for knowing. Money from men like you always comes with shadows, I said. His jaw tightened. Behind him, one of the men by the SUV looked away, as if my words had made the rain uncomfortable. Adrian slipped the envelope into his coat at last. You do not know anything about men like me. I know enough. No, he said quietly. You know what someone taught you to fear. That landed differently. Not as an insult. As an observation. It made me feel seen in a way I did not want from him. The cold reached through my wet uniform and raised goosebumps along my arms. I turned back toward the diner before my face could betray me. Good night, Mr. Blackwood. Adrian, he said. I stopped but did not turn. If you are going to refuse my money in the rain, you can use my name. I should have kept walking. Instead, I glanced over my shoulder. He stood beneath the streetlight, still holding the night around him like it belonged there. Good night, Adrian. His eyes stayed on me, calm and unreadable. Good night, Claire. I went back inside with empty hands and a heart that would not settle. Behind me, the SUV pulled away from the curb without hurry. It disappeared into the wet streets, leaving only red taillights smeared across the pavement. I told myself that was the end of it. I told myself powerful men forgot women like me as soon as the door closed. But upstairs, in an office above the city, Adrian Blackwood would open that envelope, look at the untouched money inside, and ask his men one simple question that would change everything. Find out why she needed it and still said no. The next morning arrived gray and thin, the kind of morning that made Chicago look like it had not slept either. I got home at 4:15, took off my damp uniform in the dark, and stood in the shower until the hot water turned lukewarm. I should have gone straight to bed. Instead, I sat on the edge of my mattress with my hair dripping onto my sweatshirt, staring at the overdue rent notice taped to my refrigerator. $680 past due. A number small enough to seem ridiculous to people like Adrian Blackwood, and large enough to press against my ribs every time I breathed. My phone buzzed at 7:30. The hospital. I knew before I answered. Miss Bennett, the billing coordinator said in a careful voice, the kind people use when they have bad news wrapped in policy. We need to discuss your mother's account before her next appointment. I closed my eyes. The apartment smelled like old radiator heat and cheap coffee. I made a payment last week. Yes, ma'am. We received the $80. Unfortunately, the outstanding balance remains significant. Significant. That was what people called a mountain when they were not the ones standing under it. I thanked her because I had been raised to thank people even when their words made me want to disappear. Then I hung up and looked at my hands. They were cracked from sanitizer and dish soap. I had hands that worked constantly and still could not hold enough. By 10, I was back at the diner, pouring coffee with a smile Miller kept telling me was too tired. He was jumpy all morning, glancing at the front door. Every time a car slowed outside. You should not have followed him into the rain, he muttered while stacking plates. You should not have let him leave that envelope, I said. Claire, that man could buy this whole block before lunch. Then maybe he should buy better coffee. Miller did not laugh. He looked older than he had the night before. Around noon, a woman in a cream coat came in carrying a leather folder. She was polished in a way that made the diner seem suddenly embarrassed by itself. Her nails were pale pink. Her hair was pinned perfectly. She asked for me by name. My stomach dropped. Claire Bennett. I set down the pot. That depends. She smiled like she had practiced warmth in front of a mirror. I represent the Blackwood Foundation. Miller nearly dropped a tray. I felt every customer pretend not to listen. The woman opened the folder and slid a document across the counter. Your mother's medical balance has been reviewed for emergency assistance. The foundation would like to cover all current expenses and future treatment costs for the next 12 months. The words blurred for a second. All current expenses. Future treatment. 12 months. My first feeling was not relief. It was panic. Relief came with open arms. Panic came with a locked door behind it. No, I said. The woman blinked. Excuse me. No, I pushed the paper back. Tell Adrian Blackwood I am not signing anything. Her smile thinned. Mr. Blackwood has no personal involvement in this matter. Then how did your foundation learn my mother's name before I gave it to you? The silence that followed was small but honest. Her eyes shifted once to the door and I knew. Not guessed. Knew. He had looked into my life. He had opened drawers I had not shown him. He had found the softest part of me and called it charity. I took off my apron, folded it once and set it on the counter. Miller whispered my name but I was already moving. I walked out into the cold afternoon without my coat, crossed 3 blocks to the bus stop, and rode downtown with my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Blackwood Tower rose above the financial district in black glass and steel, clean enough to reflect the clouds like it owned the sky. The lobby had marble floors, silent elevators, and security guards who looked at my diner shoes as if they had brought dirt into a church. I need to see Adrian Blackwood, I said. One guard almost smiled. Do you have an appointment? I placed the unsigned foundation papers on the desk. Tell him Claire Bennett is here to return another envelope. That changed everything. The guard's expression emptied. A phone call was made. A private elevator opened. And when the doors slid apart on the top floor, Adrian was standing at the far end of a conference room, surrounded by men in suits and a skyline worth more than my entire life. He dismissed them with one glance. Then he looked at me, really looked at my pale face, my shaking hands, my uniform under a thin sweater. You came all the way here without a coat, he said quietly. I threw the papers onto the table between us. You wanted to know why I said no? His eyes lowered to the documents, then returned to mine. Ido. My voice shook, but it did not break. Because my mother once accepted money from a powerful man. And after that, every breath in our house belonged to him. Adrian said nothing. The city moved behind him in glass and light. I stepped closer, close enough to see the surprise he did not want me to see. You call it help because you are too afraid to call it control. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian Blackwood looked like a man who had all the money in the world and no idea how to pay for what he had just broken. Adrian did not answer immediately, and somehow his silence felt louder than anger would have. The conference room was too clean, too high above the city. All glass walls and polished wood and men waiting outside who probably knew how to make problems disappear with a phone call. I stood in the middle of it in a diner sweater, with rain still drying in my hair and my pulse beating hard in my throat. For one strange second I thought he might laugh at me. Powerful men loved laughing when ordinary people tried to draw lines. But Adrian only looked at the papers on the table, then at my hands. "You are cold," he said. "That is not an answer. It was an observation. I did not come here to be observed." His mouth tightened slightly, not in anger but restraint. He walked to a chair near the wall, lifted a dark wool coat from the back of it, and brought it toward me. I stepped back before I could stop myself. The movement was small. His eyes caught it anyway. He stopped. Not close. Not insisting. Just stopped. Then he set the coat on the table between us like it was evidence, not an offering. "Use it or do not," he said. No condition attached. I hated that my body wanted the warmth. I hated more that he noticed and did not make me pay for it. "You had me investigated." "Yes." The honesty struck harder than any excuse. "You are admitting that?" I do not lie well when the truth is already standing in front of me. I stared at him. "That is supposed to make it better?" "No," he looked toward the windows, where Chicago spread beneath us in wet gray lines and steel rooftops. "It is supposed to make it true." I should have left. I had made my point. I had returned the papers. I had said what I came to say. But something in the way he stood there, all that expensive control wrapped around a silence that did not quite fit, kept me in place. "Why?" I asked. "Why look into my life?" He turned back. "Because you needed the money. A lot of people need money. But you refused mine. That is not mystery. That is boundaries. For me, those have been the same thing for a long time." The sentence landed softly, and I did not want it to. It made him sound less like a tower and more like a locked room. I looked away first. On the table, the foundation papers lay open. My mother's name printed in neat black ink. Denise Bennett. The sight of it pulled me backward into hospital corridors, plastic chairs, coffee from vending machines, and the smell of antiseptic that never left your clothes. "She worked for a man after my father died," I said before I could stop myself. Adrian did not move. "My mother. He was rich. Respected. Everyone said he was helping us. He paid bills. Fixed our car. Sent groceries. At first it felt like a miracle." My voice thinned. I pressed my fingers into my palms. Then he started deciding who she could see, where she could work, what she owed him for being kind. By the time she realized the money had strings, they were already around her life. Adrian's face changed so quietly most people would have missed it. But I was used to reading men who hid storms behind stillness. "Did he hurt her?" he asked. The question was careful. Not hungry for details. Not dramatic. Just human. "He made her smaller," I said. "Sometimes that is enough." The room went still. Outside the glass, a siren wailed far below and faded into traffic. Adrian lowered his eyes. For a moment he looked almost tired. "My mother said something similar once. I did not expect that." "What?" "That a cage does not become less cruel because the bars are gold." His voice had changed. Less polished. "I was 14. I thought she was talking about my father." Was she? She was talking about all of us. The air between us shifted, not warmer but less sharp. I did not forgive him. I did not trust him. But I saw for half a heartbeat the boy he must have been before the suit, before the guards, before the city learned to lower its voice around him. Then his phone lit up on the table. He glanced at the screen, and whatever softness had appeared vanished beneath something colder. "What is it?" I asked before I could stop myself. He did not answer right away. He touched one button, listened, and his eyes lifted to mine. "Someone else has been asking about you." My stomach dropped. "Who?" Adrian slipped the phone into his pocket, calm returning to him like armor. "A man named Victor Hale." I did not know the name, but I knew the way Adrian said it. Like a storm warning. He reached for the foundation papers, folded them once, and pushed them back toward me. "You are right. This was control." Then he took the coat from the table and held it out again, still not stepping closer. "But this is only because it is cold outside, and you should not have to freeze while deciding whether you hate me." I looked at the coat, then at him. For the first time his power did not feel like a hand closing. It felt like a door held open, waiting to see whether I would walk through on my own. I took the coat because pride did not pay heating bills, and because refusing warmth just to prove a point felt too much like letting fear make my decisions. The wool settled over my shoulders heavy and clean, still holding the faint scent of cedar and rain. Adrian did not smile when I accepted it. He did not look victorious. He only stepped aside, giving me room to pass as if the space around my body belonged to me. That should have meant nothing. Instead, it followed me all the way down the private elevator, through the marble lobby, and back into the cold afternoon where the city noise rushed around me like water. I returned to the diner before my shift started, folded the coat over the back booth, and tried to pretend my life had not tilted. Miller saw it immediately. "Please tell me that is not his." "It is a coat, Miller. That coat costs more than my fryer." "Then your fryer is underdressed." He did not laugh. Nobody seemed to laugh much around Adrian Blackwood, even when he was not in the room. I worked the dinner shift with the coat hanging behind me like a question I could not answer. Every time I passed it, I remembered Adrian's voice saying Victor Hale, and the way the name had changed the air. By 9, my feet hurt. By 10, my mother called from the hospital and pretended she was fine. "You sound tired, honey," she said. "I always sound tired." "That is not a personality, Claire." I smiled despite myself, pressing the phone between my ear and shoulder while refilling ketchup bottles. "Neither is pretending hospital pudding tastes good." She laughed softly, then coughed, and the sound pulled the smile from my face. When I hung up, the diner felt smaller, meaner. The lights buzzed overhead. Grease popped in the kitchen. A man at table 3 complained that his fries were cold even though steam still lifted from the plate. I apologized because that was part of the uniform too. Not just the apron. The apology. Near closing, the front door opened, and the bell gave its tired little ring. 2 men stepped inside. Not Adrian's men. I knew it before they spoke. They wore suits, but not with his quiet precision. Their confidence was louder, cheaper, like cologne sprayed over something rotten. One had sandy hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. The other carried a leather folder and looked at the diner as if he was already bored by owning it. "Claire Bennett?" the sandy-haired man asked. Miller froze behind the counter. I set down the coffee pot. "Who is asking?" "Friends of a friend." "Then ask your friend." His smile widened. "Victor Hale sends his regards." My stomach tightened so fast I almost missed the counter with my hand. I kept my face still. That was another skill women learn early. Do not give strange men the satisfaction of watching fear arrive. "I do not know him." "No, but you know someone he knows." The man with the folder slid into the nearest booth, opened it, and placed a cashier's check on the table. I saw the number from 6 feet away.
$52,000.
My breath caught before I could stop it. $50,000 was not money. It was oxygen. It was rent. It was surgery bills. It was my mother sleeping without worrying whether I had eaten. It was everything I had been losing 1 hour at a time. "That is yours," Sandy Hair said. "For a conversation." "About what?" "Adrian Blackwood." I looked at the check again, and I hated how beautiful relief could look when printed in black ink. "I told him no," I said quietly. "You can tell your friend the same thing." The boredom left the second man's face. "You have not heard the offer." "I heard enough." "Miss Bennett," he said, voice smoothing out. "This is not loyalty. You do not belong to Blackwood." "I do not belong to anyone." The words came sharper than I intended, and for a moment, even the rain against the windows seemed to pause. Sandy Hair leaned closer, still smiling. "That is a dangerous thing to believe in this city." I reached behind me, took Adrian's coat from the booth and laid it over my arm. Not because I belonged to him. Not because I wanted protection. Because I suddenly understood the difference between a shadow and a warning. Then maybe this city needs to learn something new. The men stared at the coat. Their smiles faded by inches. I walked to the door and opened it. "We are closed." They left without another word. But the bell above the door shook after they were gone, trembling in the quiet they left behind. Miller whispered. "Claire, what did you just do?" I looked down at the check still sitting on the table, untouched and impossible. Then I picked it up, tore it cleanly in half, and dropped both pieces into the trash. My hands were steady until I heard my phone buzz. Unknown number. One message. You should have taken the money. This time when fear came, it did not arrive alone. It arrived carrying Adrian Blackwood's name. For 5 seconds after the message appeared, I forgot how to move. The diner around me became too bright, too quiet, too full of ordinary things that suddenly looked fragile. The sugar dispensers, the ketchup bottles, the cracked red vinyl stools. Miller's hands gripping the counter like he could keep the whole building standing by holding on hard enough. You should have taken the money. 6 words. No name. No threat written out plainly enough to show anyone, yet my body understood them before my mind did. I locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and stood there with Adrian's coat folded over my arm like evidence from a life that was not supposed to touch mine. Call the police, Miller whispered. I looked at the message again. And say what? That 2 men offered me a check and sent a rude text. Say you are scared. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. Women said they were scared all the time. The world had a talent for turning fear into paperwork. Go home, Miller. Claire. Please. He hesitated, then grabbed his keys with shaking fingers and left through the back door. I waited until his car pulled away before I let myself sit. My knees felt untrustworthy. The torn pieces of the cashier's check were still in the trash, white edges visible beneath a coffee filter. $50,000 thrown away like spoiled milk. My mother would have called me reckless. My younger self would have called me proud. But somewhere deep in my chest, a quieter voice said I had done the only thing I could live with. Was reaching for my phone to call a cab when headlights swept across the diner windows. Not 1 car. 3. Black vehicles slowed outside and stopped along the curb with unsettling precision. My heart climbed into my throat. The front door was locked, but locks had always felt more symbolic than useful to me. I backed away from the glass, clutching the phone so tightly the edges pressed into my palm. Then the first car door opened, and Adrian stepped out into the rain. No umbrella. No Jerry. Just that dark coat, that still face, that strange gravity that made the night arrange itself around him. Relief hit me so hard I hated it. I opened the door before he knocked. Did you send them? I asked. His eyes moved over my face, fast and careful. No? Did you know they would come? I suspected Victor would test you. That is a very polite way to say you let me become bait. The word struck him. I saw it. His jaw tightened, but he did not defend himself quickly, and that made the anger in me burn cleaner. You should have told me. Yes, he said. Just yes. No excuse. No speech. No explanation dressed up as strategy. The rain slipped from his hair onto his collar. Behind him, his men stayed near the cars, far enough not to crowd the doorway. Are you hurt? He asked. No. Did they touch you? No. Something in his shoulders eased barely. Then his eyes dropped to the trash can behind me, where the torn check rested in pieces. You refused him too. Do not sound surprised. I am not surprised. His voice lowered. I am concerned by how much I am not surprised. I looked away because that sentence reached somewhere I did not want him near. They knew about my mother. They knew about the bills. They knew exactly what number to put in front of me. Victor buys pressure points. So do you. The silence after that was different. Not defensive. Not cold. Almost deserved. Adrian stepped inside, but only 1 step, leaving the door open behind him as if proving he was not trapping me in the room. I did, he said. And I was wrong. I stared at him. In my experience, powerful men apologize the way banks waived fees, rarely and only after calculating the benefit. Adrian did not look like he was calculating anything. He looked tired. Human, which was more dangerous than handsome ever could be. What does Victor want? I asked. Information. Leverage. Proof that you matter to me. My fingers tightened around the phone. And do I? His eyes met mine. Rain ticked against the open door. Somewhere down the block, a siren passed and faded. Yes, he said. No drama. No claim. No ownership. Just a truth placed carefully between us. My breath caught and I hated that too. Then stop making me the reason men like him come to my door. I am trying. No. You are reacting. There is a difference. His gaze sharpened, but not with anger. With attention. I stepped closer because fear had taken enough from me already. If you destroy everyone who scares me, then I become another excuse for what people already believe you are. Adrian was very still. What do you want me to do? The question stunned me more than any command could have. Men like him were not supposed to ask. They were supposed to decide, pay, punish, own the outcome. I looked at the torn check, the wet street, the coat still folded over my arm. Use your power without becoming the monster they expect. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded once, slow and solemn, like I had handed him something heavier than money. Then I will need to do this differently. He turned toward the door, then paused. Claire. I looked up. Keep the coat tonight. Not as protection. As warmth. He walked back into the rain before I could answer, leaving the door open to cold air and a choice I had not expected. For the first time, Adrian Blackwood did not feel like a man trying to buy my life. He felt like a man learning how not to take it. The next morning, Chicago looked washed clean but not forgiven. Sunlight slid between the buildings in pale strips, touching the puddles along the curb and turning every oil stain into a false rainbow. I had slept for 2 hours on my couch with Adrian's coat folded over the armrest beside me, close enough to feel like a confession and far enough to feel like resistance. When I woke, my phone had 7 missed calls from Miller, 1 voicemail from the hospital, and no messages from Adrian. That should have made me feel abandoned. Instead, it made me uneasy in a different way. He had listened. He had stepped back. And somehow that made him more present than before. By noon, the city knew something had shifted. Not because anyone said Adrian Blackwood's name out loud, but because men who lived in expensive rooms started making nervous calls. At the diner, Miller kept the television on low while pretending to polish the same coffee mug for 20 minutes. The local news showed a serious woman standing outside a federal courthouse, speaking about a financial investigation into several companies connected to Victor Hale. No dramatic language. No flashing danger. Just words like fraud, shell contracts, forged permits, and witness protection. Clean words. Legal words. Words that did not stain the hands of the person who had arranged for them to surface. I stood behind the counter with a pot of coffee cooling in my hand and understood exactly what Adrian had done. He had not stormed into the night. He had not turned me into an excuse. He had taken the weapon he understood best, power, and forced it to wear a suit respectable enough for daylight. That him? Miller asked softly. I do not know. Claire. I set the coffee pot down. Yes. Miller exhaled like he had been holding his breath since 1987. Remind me never to make you mad enough to give advice to dangerous men. I almost smiled. Then my phone rang. The hospital. My stomach tightened as I stepped into the back hallway, where the air smelled like bleach and old fryer oil. Miss Bennett, a woman said, brighter than billing coordinators usually sounded. I am calling from patient services. Your mother's procedure has been moved up. I gripped the edge of the storage shelf. Moved up. A surgical slot opened for Monday morning. Also, a nonprofit grant has been approved through the hospital's hardship program. It is not tied to an outside private donor, and there are no repayment requirements. I closed my eyes. The world narrowed to the buzz of the fluorescent light overhead, and the sound of my own breath trying not to break. Are you sure? Yes. Mom. We can send the paperwork to you this afternoon. When I hung up, I did not cry. Not right away. I stood there with one hand over my mouth, feeling relief approach carefully, like it was afraid I might send it away too. No outside private donor. No repayment. No chain. I knew Adrian was somewhere behind it, but not in the way he had been before. He had not written his name across my mother's life. He had found the door that already existed and opened it without standing in the frame. That was different. It had to be different because my heart recognized it before my pride could object. By evening, rain returned lighter this time, tapping the diner windows like fingers asking permission. We had just closed when the black SUV pulled up across the street. Adrian came alone. No men at his shoulders. No performance. Just him standing beneath the streetlight in a charcoal coat, looking less like a king and more like a man waiting to learn whether he was welcome. I opened the door before he crossed. You did it differently, I said. I tried. Victor. We'll be busy explaining paperwork to people who do not accept bribes. And my mother? His eyes softened barely. The hospital had a program. It was underfunded. Now it is not. That sounds like money. It is. But not mine. Not yours. Not hers. Not a debt. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The wet air touched my face, cool and clean. You understand how hard it is for me to believe that? Yes. Do you understand why? I am beginning to. The answer was so quiet it almost disappeared under the rain. He reached into his coat, and my body stiffened before I could stop it. He saw. Of course he saw. His hand paused, then moved slowly, giving me time to say no. He took out a plain white envelope, unsealed, and held it flat on his palm. No money, he said. No contract. I did not take it yet. Then what is it? Something that belonged to your mother. My pulse stumbled. I opened the envelope with cold fingers. Inside was a photocopy of an old promissory note, one I recognized from my mother's locked drawer, the paper that had followed her through years of shame. Across the copy, stamped in red, was the word void. My throat tightened. How? The original debt was sold 3 times. I bought the company that held it. I looked up sharply. Adrian held my gaze. Then I dissolved the claim. Publicly. Legally. Permanently. The rain blurred the streetlights behind him. 4 years, that paper had lived in my mother's house like a ghost with a signature. And now it was gone. Not hidden. Not transferred. Gone. Why are you showing me the copy? I whispered. Because the original is hers to destroy if she wants to. Not mine. I stared at him, and something inside me, something clenched for so long it had become part of my posture, loosened by one careful inch. Adrian did not step closer. He did not ask for gratitude. He simply stood there, letting the rain fall between us like a border he had finally learned not to cross. What do you want from me now? I asked. His answer came after a long breath. Nothing you do not choose. And that was the first thing Adrian Blackwood ever gave me that I did not want to return. Monday morning smelled like antiseptic, rainwater, and coffee that had been sitting too long in a paper cup. I sat beside my mother's hospital bed while she slept, her hand resting in mine, lighter than I remembered and warmer than I feared. The procedure had gone well. That was what the surgeon said, with the tired smile of a woman who had delivered enough bad news to understand the weight of good news. I thanked her 3 times. My mother thanked her 5. Then when the room finally quieted and the monitors softened into a steady rhythm, she looked at the envelope on her tray table and asked, "Is that really it?" I nodded. The original note lay inside, old paper, old ink, old shame. Adrian had not brought it himself. A hospital attorney had delivered it with formal language and no pressure, explaining that the claim had been legally dissolved and that Mrs. Denise Bennett could destroy the document, keep it, frame it, or ignore it forever. For a long time my mother only stared at it. Then she picked it up with trembling fingers, folded it once, folded it again, and tore it slowly down the middle. No drama. No speech. Just a sound like a small door unlocking after years of rust. She cried then, quietly, the way women cry when they are finally allowed to stop being strong for a minute. I pressed my forehead to her hand and cried with her. That afternoon, Miller called to say the diner had been temporarily closed for labor violations. He swore he had no part in reporting. By Thursday he called again, voice shaking, to tell me a restaurant group had offered to reopen it under new management, with back pay for every employee, proper schedules, health insurance, and a position for me if I wanted it. Not charity, he kept saying. A real contract. Salary. Benefits. A small ownership share after 1 year. I asked who owned the restaurant group. Miller went silent long enough for me to understand. That evening I met Adrian outside the hospital, under the covered entrance where taxis hissed along the wet curb and families moved in and out carrying flowers, balloons, and exhaustion. He wore a navy coat this time, no guards close enough to be seen. In his hand was a folder. I looked at it and raised an eyebrow. You have a dangerous relationship with paper. Something almost gentle touched his face. I am learning. He handed it to me, open, not sealed. A job offer. Reviewed by an independent attorney. No obligation to accept. No penalty if you refuse. No connection to your mother's care. I read the first page slowly. The terms were clear. Fair. Better than fair but not absurd. There was room for me to say no without the world falling apart. That mattered more than the money. Why? I asked. Adrian looked through the glass doors toward the hospital lobby, where my mother was somewhere upstairs breathing easier than she had in months. Because you were right. I waited. He returned his eyes to mine. I thought help meant removing every obstacle, paying every bill, solving every problem before anyone could argue. I thought power was only useful if it ended the discussion. His voice lowered. You made me understand that sometimes power should create a choice and then step back from it. The city moved around us, wet tires on pavement, distant horns, the soft rush of automatic doors. I held the folder against my chest, not as a shield this time, but because my hands needed somewhere to put the feeling. I am still not something you get to fix, I said. I know. Or study. I know. Or own. Adrian's eyes did not flinch. I know that most of all. I believed him, not completely but enough for the first step, and sometimes the first step is the only honest kind of faith. I handed him back his coat, folded neatly, the way I had promised myself I would when I no longer needed it to feel safe. He accepted it with both hands, careful, almost reverent. Thank you for the warmth, I said. Thank you for returning it. I looked up at him. Most men would have used it as a reason to come closer. I wanted to. The honesty should have startled me. Instead, it steadied the air between us. But wanting is not permission. For the first time, I smiled at him without fear hiding behind it. You are learning. Slowly, he said. But I am. A week later, I signed the contract after my own lawyer reviewed every page. My mother came home. Miller cried when he saw the new schedule board. Mr. Ellis ate breakfast on the house officially this time. And Adrian Blackwood still came to the corner booth, still ordered coffee he barely drank, still watched the room like it was a language he was trying to read. But he never left envelopes anymore. He left space. He left silence when I needed it. He left choices where other men had left chains. And somewhere between the rain, the diner lights, and the quiet way he learned to stand near my life without stepping on it, I understood something I had once been too tired to believe. Some men want to buy your surrender. Some want to earn your trust. And the difference is not in what they give you. It is in what they are willing to stop taking.